As we wrap up 2024, I thought it'd be fun to look back at the top 5 most watched shorts from my YouTube channel this year. These were the moments that resonated most with you, and I'm excited to dive deeper into each one. Hey there, I'm Stuart Perry, but most people know me as Mr. Stu. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, a child therapist, and an autism spectrum disorder clinical specialist. Here on Bad Kids Don't Exist, I help adults better understand kids so kids and their caregivers can thrive. In today's live episode, we'll watch my top 5 shorts from this past year together. I'll share where I was when I filmed them, why I think they struck a chord with so many of you, and expand on each topic to give you even more tools to support the kids in your life. Before we get started, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs these insights. Let's celebrate the progress we've made this year and carry these lessons into 2025. And let's jump right into it. Coming in at number 5 is a short about one of the most important lessons I talk about: respect. Respect isn't just something we expect from kids, it's something we have to model first. Let's watch this short together and then I'll share a bit more about it.
We cannot disrespect kids and then expect them to respect us. Just because they are kids does not mean you get to talk to them however you want to talk to them. It's simple as that. You have to respect them. You have to show them what you want. Then they can match it.
Respect is a two-way street. Kids learn it by observing how adults treat them and how adults treat others. This specific clip came from my training called From Chaos to Calm: Ways to Deal with Disruptive Behaviors, is basically what the training is all about. And this is from the first time I ever did that training. During the training, people ask different questions, and there's actually another clip in the top 5 clips from today that is also from another edition of this training. But this one was all about what to do when a child doesn't show you respect. And as the discussion kept going, I realized it was really important to talk about the way that kids learn how to give respect is by first being respected. Many times there are adults in kids' lives who just demand that children respect them, but don't show the children the respect that they want to see. Maybe they cut the child off as the child is speaking, or they scream at the child, or they don't model the way that they want the child to be respecting them. They don't model the behavior that they want to see in the child. Just recently, I had a family that was meeting in my office, and I was meeting them for the first time. We were doing what's called a comprehensive evaluation, where I get to know some about the child and their situation and some things that they may want to work on and come up with if there's a diagnosis, all those types of things. And throughout the course of this conversation, the mother repeatedly just said, "He's just so disrespectful. He's just so disrespectful." And the child was sitting right there, but the child interrupted at one point and said, "I don't think that's what it is." And the mother looked back at him and said, "Why won't you just shut up? Just shut up." And I looked at the mother and I said, "Hold on. You're talking about how he is being disrespectful, but you're telling him to shut up. And I just need to let you know that's not something I'm going to allow you to say to him in my office." And immediately the whole conversation shifted. Everything became different at that point. And I said, I know you are working really hard and I know that you are really frustrated, but I'm not going to allow you to yell at and tell him to shut up in front of me in my office. And from that point forward, it did change. And some of you might be thinking, yeah, I bet she was really ticked off. And maybe she was, but she began to speak about him differently. She began to say, yeah, I just know that he's really struggling because he's doing all these things at school and he's starting to do these things at home, and I'm just really frustrated because I'm getting called from work. But because I said, hey, that's not a way that I'm going to allow you to speak to him, I'm not going to allow you to disrespect him in my office like that, everything changed. And I can also tell you that there were times he began to interrupt his mother again, and I looked back at him and I said, hold on. I said to mom that I wasn't going to let her say some things to you in that way, but I also need to tell you we're going to let mom finish what she has to say. That's how you're going to show respect to mom in my office. And then he did. It was as if once mom was able to start showing more respect to him, he was able to start showing more respect to mom. And that is how it works. Kids don't just know, they aren't just born with this idea of respect. They have to learn it. And the way that they learn it is by watching you. They see how you treat them. They see how you treat others. They see how you treat the cashier at McDonald's. They see how you treat the server at the restaurant. They see how you talk to other parents at the school. They see how you talk to their teachers, and they are watching to see how they should also be doing the same. Next time your child is being quote unquote disrespectful, you can pause and ask yourself, am I modeling what I want them to do? Or have I modeled what I want them to do? And if the answer is no, start modeling it. If the answer is yes, then talk with them about how you have shown this to them and see where that disconnect might be. Children don't just come up with disruptive behaviors, they see them and then they do them back. Make sure that you are modeling for your child the behavior that you want to see. There's that golden rule, treat others the way that you want to be treated. And there's kind of a follow-up to it, that treat others the way you want to be treated, even when they aren't treating you that way. And really, that's what the golden rule is all about. It's not just treat others the way that they treat you, it's treat them how you want to be treated, whether or not they reciprocate. And that doesn't mean stay around them if they continue to not reciprocate. It means that you are going to show respect whether or not they are showing respect back to you. And that also needs to continue on with children. That if you want your child to show respect, you need to treat them how you want to be treated. Whether or not they continue to show that behavior, you still need to model it for them, and over time, that's how they'll pick it up. If this resonates with you, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment about how you teach respect in your home or your classroom. At number 4, we're diving into a video that was surprising to me to make it into the top 5. This is a video about how kids perceive time. Have you ever told a child to wait just 5 minutes and it feels like an eternity to them? There's actually a scientific reason behind that. Let's take a look at this together.
That's why we use timers with little kids. Because if we say 5 minutes to a little kid, we could literally wait a year and tell them 5 minutes has passed and they'd be like, oh, great. I'm so glad. We could wait 2 seconds and tell them 5 minutes has passed and they would say, oh man, 5 minutes, that's pretty quick. And they move right on. They just don't get it. Planning ahead is not something that little kids are good at because that prefrontal cortex is not accessed.
The concept of time is different for kids because the part of the brain that helps us understand time, whether it's just how long time is or how we need to plan ahead for something or how we need to think about things for the future. That part of the brain is right behind the forehead. It's called the prefrontal cortex, and that part of the brain is still developing. There are different lobes in the brain, there's different pieces in the brain, and that part is called, like I said, the prefrontal cortex. And that part of the brain isn't fully connected until age 12. That doesn't mean that there's no access to that part of the brain. It doesn't mean that kids can't use their prefrontal cortex at all. It just means there's not a strong connection until age 12. There's not a full strong connection until at least age 25. That part of the brain that helps us understand how long 30 seconds is, how long 1 minute is, how long 5 minutes is, that is that part of the brain. And so for children, what is really helpful is helping them develop that prefrontal cortex, helping them develop that concept of time. And the way that you can do that most easily with a young child is to use what are called visual timers or countdowns. And when you are using those visual timers or countdowns, to follow through on the amount of time. So if you say, hey, we're going to go in 5 minutes, or hey, you have 5 minutes left on your video game, that doesn't mean come back in 1 minute and tell them that 5 minutes has passed. That throws off that development of that understanding time. Or if you tell them 5 minutes, it doesn't mean come back in 20 minutes and say, oh, it's been 5 minutes. You can come back and say it's been 20 minutes, but try to keep it as close as you can, and that helps them develop that planning ahead skill. That video came from a training I do about working with young children. In my therapy practice, I specialize in children, especially elementary age and younger, those with what's called developmental trauma. So if they experience trauma during the first 3 years of their life. And I also specialize in working with children with autism spectrum disorder. That training talks about how to work with those young children whose prefrontal cortexes haven't yet come online. A lot of times as adults, we look at children, especially young children, and we think of them as just little adults or miniature adults. And that is not what they are at all. There are so many things that make them brilliant and amazing, and just they see the world in beautiful, incredible ways. But there are also some things about young children that can be very frustrating, and that's why I designed that training to help people understand working with young children. One of the things that can be so frustrating is when you tell them, hey, we're about to leave in 5 minutes. It seems like in 5 minutes, they have not even begun to start. And again, that's because of that prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is also responsible for, like I said, time management. It's responsible for being able to think ahead or plan ahead and think, hey, if I do this, this might happen. So a lot of times when you ask kids, why did you do that? They say the four-letter word I-O-N-O. It's, I don't know. That's what they say because their brain didn't think about why am I doing this? Their brain just thought, I feel like doing this. It's also involved in impulse control. So not just thinking and then doing. The prefrontal cortex helps them with that. It helps them understand language and nuances in language. And if you think about the things that can be a lot of times very frustrating for working with or having younger children, it's those things. Time management, not understanding what you really mean when you say different things, not thinking ahead, but just reacting. All of those things can be frustrating. And I want you to breathe easy if you are frustrated with a young child about those things because their brain hasn't picked up the part of the brain that helps them do all of those things. And as a matter of fact, even if you're dealing with a teenager, know that they're very new at having that full connection to the prefrontal cortex. If you are dealing with someone who is under the age of 25, there is not a strong, full connection to that prefrontal cortex. So breathe easy and know that they've got time to grow, they've got room to develop, and it may not be that they have some disorder that's throwing off their time management or some disorder that's throwing off their impulse control. It's just that the prefrontal cortex isn't fully connected just yet. Let me know in the comments, what's the longest your child has ever waited for something, and how did they handle it? Coming in at number 3 is a short that struck a chord with so many of you. It's all about how trauma rewires the brain and why, for some kids, chaos can feel familiar, even comforting. Let's watch and unpack this together.
Any person's brain, when it has been traumatized, it's actually wired to seek trauma rather than seek calm, because the trauma feels more calm. It feels more normal. So their pattern is more chaotic. So a lot of times the chaos is not only their norm, but what they think they desire. It feels better. That's why we see military people who come home and then they want to redeploy back into these pretty intense situations, because the chaos has become their norm.
Trauma rewires the brain, and it rewires it to prioritize survival, which makes chaos feel familiar. In an earlier video, I told you that another video came from my training, From Chaos to Calm, Effective Strategies for Handling Difficult Behaviors. This is that other clip that came from that training. This one specifically was done at a conference called ClarityCon in San Antonio, Texas, and someone was asking about children and their brain development and how trauma can cause children to seek out more chaos. They actually said, I am working with a child who has experienced this developmental trauma, and if you have watched my channel very much, you know that that's one of the things that I specialize in. And they said, it seems like this child enjoys the chaos. It seems like that's what they desire more than anything else, is just to be in a more chaotic environment. And that is when I shared with them this insight that trauma does rewire the brain. It actually makes it feel as though chaos is more comfortable. And one way to think about it is like this. This is a snow globe that I actually created for a training where I talk about PTSD. And the way that the brain works is that there are some day-to-day things, and we're all hustling and bustling throughout the day, and then eventually we're able to pause, and once we pause, everything kind of settles back down, and the brain has time to store things in short-term memory, store things in long-term memory. It has time to say, hey, we don't need to remember that at all, we can just forget it. But for the brain of someone who has experienced trauma and actually has a trauma disorder, what happens is the brain never stops shaking. It continues to live as if the trauma is going on. And when other things around it are settled, it doesn't feel comfortable. It feels like, why isn't everybody doing this the way that I'm doing it? I need more things to be like this. As I said in the clip, this is why people from the military a lot of times will go on active duty, and then they'll come home and they'll tell these horror stories of the things that happened in active duty, but they'll talk about how they can't wait to get back. It's because when things are settled, it doesn't feel good to them. It feels like everything should still be shaking. And what we have to do is help their brain learn to settle down, and over time it might keep going it might keep going a little bit more, and it might keep going, but over time it can learn to settle, and then there can be some calm in the chaos. It is so important to create a predictable and safe environment for all kids, but especially kids who have experienced trauma. because their brain is feeling like if things aren't on edge, I don't know what to do. When things feel more calm, it feels more uncomfortable for me. It feels like I don't belong here because my brain keeps shaking. And the more we can create that predictable and safe environment, the more their brain is able to relearn a new pattern. And that's the important part. It's a pattern. It's not one day of being predictable and safe. It is a pattern where you show up every day, and even though there is chaos, you continue to be predictable and you continue to be safe. And then over time, their brain learns a new way to be. It can settle down. Because really, the problem with trauma is it's not what happened, it's that the brain believes that what happened is still happening, or that what happened is going to happen again very soon. So that brain doesn't feel like it can calm down. It feels like if it were to calm down, it would get re traumatized, that more chaos would happen and that it would happen to it, and that would be unsafe. When you can create that predictable and safe environment for kids who have experienced trauma, they are able to see that even though things feel chaotic sometimes, it's okay to settle and it will be safe even when they do settle down. Drop a comment if you've worked with or supported a child who struggles with feeling safe, and share what has helped them most from your perspective. At number 2, we're tackling something almost every caregiver has done: yelling. This short explains why yelling can shut kids down emotionally and what to do instead. Let's check it out together.
Kids, if you are shouting at them, if you are yelling at them, all they see is big bad adult screaming at me. When a child thinks that an adult is screaming at them, there's nothing they can do but be scared. So if you are shouting, raising your voice, anything like that, it's time to tap out, let somebody else come in and help little Timmy regulate.
Yelling activates the fight or flight response in kids, and that shuts down their ability to learn or to problem solve. In that training that I keep coming back to, it's called From Chaos to Calm: Effective Strategies for Handling Difficult or Disruptive Behaviors. I've done that training all over the country this past year. And in that training, I talk about how the fight or flight response is really kids being trapped in the lowest part of their brain. It's called the reptilian brain. It's the brain stem. And that part of the brain is only responsible with keeping us alive. It's not responsible for rational thought. It's not responsible for understanding emotions. It's not responsible for problem solving. It is just responsible for heart rate, breathing, and digestion, and this fight or flight response. When children are being yelled at by an adult, it causes them to panic, and it sets off a part in their brain called the amygdala that traps them down in that fight or flight response. When you are yelling or screaming at a child and you see that their face gets really wide and they go like this, it may seem like you've got their attention, but really what you've done is you've trapped them down in the fight or flight response. There are also times where I've seen adults yelling at children and the child will start to giggle. That giggling is a fight or flight response. And then the adult will call out the giggle. They'll say, and oh, you think that this is just so funny. And the child isn't thinking that it's funny. They are trapped in fight or flight mode. They are not rationally thinking. They are not rationally responding. They are trapped. Now, also on this short, there have been some comments that were posted saying, well, what do I do if my child is running across the street and I need them to stop running across the street because there's a car coming, or running in the parking lot, or whatever dangerous thing it might be? in those situations. It could be that you have to raise your voice or yell or shout or even scream to get their attention to activate that fight or flight response because you want them to look and see, oh my goodness, there's a car coming. But if you are just yelling at and screaming at your child because they are being quote unquote disrespectful and you are causing them to trigger into that fight or flight mode, don't expect a more rational response. Or if you are yelling at or screaming at your child in order to quote unquote teach them a lesson and quote unquote discipline them, don't expect that lesson to stick because when people are trapped in that fight or flight mode, there isn't memory that gets encoded. It is just reactive. So if you start yelling or screaming at children because that's how you're going to discipline them, just expect to have to yell or scream more often, not less often. What you can do instead is, yes, you can be firm and you can use a firm tone to set boundaries without escalating your emotion. That yelling and screaming to a child is just big, bad adult yelling and screaming at me. And when a child sees big, bad adult yelling and screaming at me, there's nothing they can feel but fear. And that is what I was trying to convey in that training. That training specifically was done for the YMCA of Greater Louisville, where I spoke to all of the staff who would be working at the YMCA summer camps for the entire region of Louisville. That includes parts of Indiana. And I was sharing with them, I know that sometimes you are going to feel amped up, that you are going to feel escalated yourself. When you start to feel that way, it is time for you to tap out and let someone else deal with this child and deal with what's going on. It's okay to say that you need a break too. It's not about denying that you are feeling emotions and going, no, I'm just fine. Everything's fine. Oh, I'm going to be just fine. It's not about doing that. That also looks fake to a child and it doesn't teach the child how to handle their emotions. In an earlier video, I explained that in order for a child to show respect, they have to be shown respect first. The same is true here. In order for a child to learn to deal with their emotional response, they have to be able to watch you deal with your emotional response. That even though you are feeling escalated, that you are going to stay in control of yourself. Yelling and screaming at a child tells the child the way to deal with this emotion is to start to yell and scream back. And also, just so we can take it to the next level, in so many of my videos, I talk about the prefrontal cortex and how that part of the brain is not developed in young children and how that part of the brain helps us understand language. Because children don't have access to a strong connection with the prefrontal cortex, they aren't great at using language. So if they are yelled and screamed at often, they don't have the words to yell and scream back. They will either just scream and make an audible noise, or their yells and screams will come out in disruptive behavior rather than in words because they don't have the words. They don't have the part of the brain that helps them to understand what words to use. So if you yell and scream at them, what a child sees is, okay, the way to deal with this is to yell and scream, but I don't have the words, so I'm just going to throw a tantrum. Or I'm just going to throw something because yelling and screaming feels like things are being thrown at the child. And the child says, okay, well, I guess this is how I'm supposed to deal with emotions. When I feel these big emotions, rather than staying in control of myself, I need to start yelling and screaming and throwing things back at the person who's making me feel this way. Children will do what it is they see you do much more than what you say to them. If you want them to stay in control of their emotions, make sure that you do your best at staying in control of yours so that they know how to handle it. And when you mess up, because you will mess up, go to them and be honest and apologize and don't make excuses and don't say, but you were. Nope. It's just, I should not have handled that way. I am so sorry. It's something I'm working on. I am really going to do a better job at not yelling and screaming so much. Please let me know if you feel like I'm doing that. My niece is so cute, and over the past week I've gotten to hang out with my niece and my nephew quite a bit for the holidays. And my niece, she will hear me talking with Stark, and if you don't know about Stark, Stark is my service dog. He is the absolute best. And Stark is very obedient as well. So I don't raise my voice to Stark. I don't have to scream at Stark. I really can just say, Stark, get to your place, or Stark, come here. But my niece, she looked at me and she said, Uncle Stu, you don't talk so nice to Stark. And I said, oh, it seems to you like I'm being rude to Stark. And she said, yeah, you're being rude to him. And I said, okay, well, if you feel like I'm speaking that way to him, just let me know. Later that night, she was in the middle of telling a story, and I was calling Stark over to me, and she stopped her story and she looked at me and she goes, Uncle Stu. She threw her hands up and it was like a, come on, we just talked about this. And I said, oh, you thought that sounded rude? And she said, yes. And I said, oh, okay. I go, Starky boy, come here. Oh, you are just the best. Come here. And she goes, that's better. Think about that as you are working with kids. It doesn't mean that you have to do it. Oh, Starky boy, come here. It's okay to be firm, but make sure that you are not escalating your emotions as you are dealing with disruptive behaviors. If you start to feel yourself lose control, take a break, just like you would ask a child to take a break if they were losing control of themselves during their episode of emotionality. It's okay to tap out. It's okay to ask for a break. It's okay to ask for help. And it's okay to apologize. Let me know in the comments, have you tried lowering your voice instead of raising it? What difference did that make? Finally, the number one most viral short of the year is all about the power of play. Why does play beat repetition when it comes to learning? Let's watch and find out why this message resonated with so many people.
Research shows that it takes 400 repetitions to create a new connection in the brain. What that means is that if you want to teach someone something, it's going to take 400 times of you teaching it the same way every single time in order for that person to learn it. And I see some faces. Yeah. Some faces are like, oh my gosh. Here's the good news. Unless it's done through play, in which case it only takes 10 to 20 times. So you have the option. You get to choose. You can teach your child something 400 times, or you can choose to engage them through play, in which case it only takes 10 to 20 repetitions.
Play engages multiple areas of the brain, making learning stick better than just rote repetition. This was actually recorded at one of the first trainings I ever did. And this training is not one I did in 2024, but this short came out in 2024. It was a training I was really excited to give, all about play and why play is so helpful. I did this training for a group of parents who was learning how to teach their children to read with play, and they were also learning how to discipline children using play. Now, when I posted that short, I cannot tell you how many comments popped up that said, I want the reference for this information. I want the research for this. So let me explain it here. That research was done by a doctor. Her name is Dr. Karen Purvis, and she made that comment during a speech. Shortly after she made the comment in her speech, Karen Purvis passed away. And the research that she commented about has actually never been released. But so I guess I'm saying that to say those specific numbers, 400 times versus 10 to 20 times, those are the numbers that Dr. Karen Purvis quoted and said that her research was showing, but that research was never released. But, so now let me get to the but there is tons of research that shows play is so much better than just rote repetition at helping people, not just kids, but people learn things. Just this past week, I was having a discussion at church in a Bible study that I'm in, and we were talking about how people with brain injuries, people who have had strokes, and even people who are suffering from dementia, a lot of times can bring back some emotional memories or can bring back some playful things from their lives. And I can tell you for myself personally, I have a grandmother who is in an assisted living home right now because she fell down and she could not remember how to get back up. But there are songs that they sing together in that assisted living home that she knows every single word to, does not need to see the lyrics for, and she is just thriving when it comes to being able to sing those songs. Another thing that she loves to do in that assisted living home is paint. And she's never been much of a painter before she moved into this assisted living home, but now she is painting and she absolutely loves that time being able to paint. Let me tell you why play works better than just saying something over and over and over again. Again, those specific numbers, 400, 10 to 20, let's break down what that means. That means if your child cleans their room once a week, every week, then it will take them 8 years to learn how you want them to clean up that room if you teach them the same way every single time. That's 400 repetitions. Or you can make it playful. You can start to sing a song while they do it. You can turn it into a competition where it's, hey, let's see if you can beat the clock. Let's see if you can go even faster this time in getting all the toys picked up off the floor. And it will program their brain. And there's a real reason why that works. And there's a real reason why people who have suffered brain injuries can bring back memories the more playful they are with that memory. There are different lobes in the brain. There's the brain stem, then above the brain stem, there's what's called the temporal lobe. In the back of the brain, there's what's called the occipital lobe. At the top back of the brain, there's what's called the parietal lobe. And in the frontal part of the brain, there's what's called the frontal lobe. That one's really easy to remember. Each part of the brain is responsible for different senses and it's responsible for different functions. It does different things. When someone is playing, they are engaging their sight and their smell and their hearing and their touch and sometimes even their taste. And each of those is different lobes of the brain. Play manually causes all lobes of the brain to work together by taking all of those senses and having them work on one thing. In a most basic example, when children are learning how to say the alphabet, it's not done by just saying, repeat after me. A, A, B, B, C, C, D, D. If you tried to teach a child the alphabet that way, it would take them about 400 times of going through the alphabet to learn how to do it. Instead, what we do is say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, and we make it much more playful. We involve music. Sometimes we involve motions. Sometimes we have kids get up and dance while they are singing the ABC song, and it sticks in their brain much more heavily because play engages multiple areas of the brain. Here's another thing is that emotional memories, positive and negative, are much more encoded than just regular memories. I explained to you that my grandmother fell down and couldn't remember how to get back up. And really, a basic theory of that is that getting back up after you fall down isn't much of an emotional thing. You just kind of have fallen down on the ground and then you get back up and you do it. There were other people in the Bible study explaining how their parents had forgotten how to dress themselves. And for the most part, day to day, just dressing yourself has no emotional connection to it whatsoever. It's just a task. Those memories that don't have emotion to them don't stick in the brain as much. Play causes some positive emotion. And at times, play can cause some very frustrating emotion, and play can cause some exhilarating emotion, and play can cause some exciting emotion. But play causes emotion to happen. And when emotion happens at developmentally appropriate levels, those memories are encoded much deeper and much stronger than just rote tasks. When you can play, you are engaging multiple areas of the brain that causes the brain to work together. And the more areas of the brain that have to work together means that there are more parts of the brain that are connected to that memory, more parts of the brain that can work to retrieve that memory. It helps kids and all people, but a lot of times I focus on kids. It helps kids remember things better. And when those emotional memories happen, those memories are better stored as well. Play does both of those things. If you can incorporate play into everyday routines, even for things like chores or homework, your child will be able to learn things much faster and they will remember them much more fully. Use play as often as you can. Not only does it make life more enjoyable and it helps you work with your child rather than against your child in frustrating moments, it helps them learn lessons faster and it helps those lessons to stick deeper and stick for longer. Share in the comments what's your favorite way to incorporate play into learning with your kids. From the importance of respect to the power of play, these top 5 shorts represent the conversations that resonated most with you in 2024. Thank you for being part of this journey and for making these topics go viral. If you enjoyed this, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who could benefit from these insights. And let me know in the comments which short stood out to you the most this year. As we head into 2025, I am so excited to keep creating content that helps adults better understand kids. If you're looking for a keynote speaker or workshop leader, head over to badkidsdon'texist.com/booking to learn more about how I can support your team or organization. Until next time, and as a matter of fact, until next year, this is Mr. Stu, reminding you that some things exist, some things don't. Bad kids don't exist. Peace.